This next lockdown, the rumors I was hearing this last spring, with a hard lockdown, the only essential workers will be government, law enforcement, military, medical personnel, and emergency services. Everybody else will be declared non-essential and be told to stay home, which means you're not going to see your big box stores open. You're not going to see the grocery store open. If you somehow were able to get past the cop patrolling your street, make it to that supermarket, it's going to be locked. It's closed up. No one's going to be there. You're not going to be able to get food. You're not going to be able to order food on Uber Eats because no one's going to be allowed to be at that restaurant to make any food to deliver to your home. Now, when we were having that conversation on this stuff earlier this year over on the conspiracy webs, the questions kept coming up is, well, how are people going to eat? Because most people only have a day, maybe two worth of food inside their home. And the chatter was, food would be distributed by local authorities and the military. Where would they get this food, people would ask. They would get it from warehouses and supermarkets, grocery stores, restaurants, wherever they could get a hold of it. Now, how conceivably could they hand out this food? This is going into the conspiracy realm for sure. But the thoughts were, they will go door to door to confirm the number of people in the home. I said confirm, not find out, confirm. Because they will be going off of existing records such as IRS filings, school records, to find out the number of people inside that home. You will then have certain guidelines that you have to follow in order to receive your food shipments. It could be something as you have to turn in your firearms, you have to turn in your ammunition, your high-capacity magazines. Maybe it's you'll have to get a certain vaccination or whatever they come up with. And they won't give you that next box of food to last a week, or what they'll tell you will last a week, it'll probably last only a few days. Because there's only so much out there in supermarkets and in warehouses. You'll have to prove to them that you've met the criteria to justify getting the food. So we are talking then an actual hardcore martial law without it being declared. It'll be a public health crisis. Once again, a resurgence of a virus of unspecified origins, which we will be told that there's so many people that are dying from it that we have to stay in our homes for, they swear, 2 weeks or whatever they come up with. This is something that easily they could drag out for months, as we've seen in 2020, for God's sakes. That probably was just a test run. And we're about to go into the live action phase of the exercise. Or the beginning of the hardcore part of their plan. Because once people are locked up in their homes, they're easier to find and round up, aren't they? They'll be easier to find more of those J6 insurgents or domestic violent extremists or just general troublemakers. You know, you get the idea. Now, when we were discussing this stuff in the chat over on Telegram and the SG42 chat, there was one person in there, he couldn't wrap his head around this. He kept talking about, well, you never see viruses get more deadly. They only get more prolific, easier to spread, but not deadlier, which is the same shit we were saying back in 2020. And I and at least one other person were trying to point out to him that there doesn't actually have to be a a actual illness that this is tied to. All they have to do is say that there's an illness and tell you that people are dying. Remember in 2020 the daily death counts and how people literally thought 10% of the United States had died from COVID? How many actually died? It was only around 1 million. Well, 1 million is not 10% of the U.S. population. The United States does not have only 10 million people. The United States right now is around 350 million. There was not 30 million people dead in 2020 in the United States alone. But there was the perception, the fear that there was, and that's what they're going for. And I pointed out in the chats and stuff that, remember they were talking about mandatory mass vaccinations. My job actually was taking a survey to find out who would willingly take the vaccination if it became mandatory. Those of us who would not take the mandatory vaccination would be terminated automatically once it went into effect on the deadline. Well, we did have kind of a mass uprising in our facility over that, so. But that wasn't all, and I mentioned this in the chat. Now, when the talk was that there was going to be mass mandatory vaccinations for everyone, and this was only a year and a half ago that they were talking about this, remember? It was not that long ago. You should not have forgotten. At that time, I know there was people in my area that were just waiting for that layoff. And then they were going to go to the woods, and they were going to start stacking bodies. And I mentioned this in the chat. And then there was another person saying that they didn't believe it because they seen in their area, everyone backed down, got the shot, whatever. Well, I pointed out that I know for a fact that was the case because I was talking with some of them. I and a group of people, and that's all I'm going to say, there's no details. We were talking at the time that if they went through with the mandatory vaccinations, that after we were laid off, we would meet, we would go to the woods, and we would start taking lives. Now, I'm not saying that we were planning on going out and assassinate people or kidnap people. I'll clarify this. The targets that we were talking about at that time were these mandatory vax centers. We wouldn't hit them while people were there. We'd hit them when they were empty. Burn them, wreck them, whatever. Just general sabotage. We also discussed that, and I'll give an example on this. Let's say the vaccines were transported by FedEx. We learned the pattern of when the vaccines come in. We stop that FedEx truck at an advantageous location. We detain the driver, remove those shipments of vaccine from the vehicle, destroy them, then release the driver and tell him have a nice day. Now, when it would get to the point that those deliveries would be escorted, those escorts would end up becoming human compost. We also discussed, because there was talk about this 2 years ago, remember? People were sneaking the memos out of state health authorities, health state administrations and departments, talking about mandatory vaccination teams that would go door to door and forcefully vaccinate everyone in a family. So we talked about, well, how would we counter that? How could we stop those vaccination teams from going out and vaccinating people who did not want to get vaccinated, who were being forced at gunpoint to be vaccinated? That's the type of planning that we were talking about. Now, you'll probably probably still say that's illegal, that's insurrection. Remember what the other side was talking about at that time. They were talking about coercing us to get that vaccination, that we should lose our jobs, our bank accounts should be frozen, we should be denied being able to make purchases, children should be taken away, we should be arrested, rounded up, and put into camps. All that was stuff that was being talked about less than 2 years ago. So do you really think the conversation I and others were having at that time was not justified? We damn sure did, because we looked at it as we would be resisting a tyrannical, in-your-face police state. That's just what we planned to do back then. And I'll throw this out there for those of you that may have been part of that in the past. You know who I am, you know how to get a hold of me. Maybe we should get together again and, stop and have chats by the sides of dirt roads once again without our cell phones. Person to person. Just saying, I'd like to touch base again, see how things are going with the family and stuff. And that's where a lot of people that were thinking about this were coming from for an angle. They were thinking about their kids. Their kids being taken away from them. Their kids being forcefully vaccinated. Think about that. Well, this next lockdown